Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Only Balls and Horses podcast. We're back again in really quite shit circumstances, I'm afraid. Ollie Bell, Nick Goff joining us. You win the T-shirt competition, Goffy. Well done.
Yeah, I'm wearing that this week. I'll have a different T-shirt next week.
For those that are listening to this just on the podcast, it says TEIAM, player. There's no I in T.
Yet, Ollie?
Sorry?
You worked out what it means yet?
No, I've Googled it. Still no.
That is quite important to remember that people are still going to be listening and not being able to see. So thanks for that. That was
Tom.
that was on my part.
Are we recording this time?
Yeah, we're recording. We are recording. Yeah. I was going to get Foldsy on, but I thought, Foldsy wasn't available. We are officially recording. How are we, lads? We're all happy. We're all surviving.
Oh yeah, buzzing. Really busy.
I've watched a lot of Tenable with Warwick Davis, and been playing some poker, so that's been keeping me busy. But other than that, I haven't changed my clothes for a week, haven't shaved, and hibernating.
You haven't shaved?
No, 33 years later, and this is what it looks like.
It's not bad. It's not bad. It's more growth than I thought you'd have at this stage. Well done.
Thank you.
So we have a bit of, because there was somebody getting in touch about the intro music. Just to update you on our intro music, it's an absolute shit show. I lost my first laptop, got water damage, and my next one now isn't turning on. The intro's dead. But Ollie, you can give us our brilliant intro music before we get into the meat of this podcast.
One of the things that I've been doing is I've been trying to learn the guitar. So I've been trying to teach myself the guitar on YouTube. And it was going really well. And then I got to a point where I needed to retune it. So I ended up getting an app to tune the guitar. And you might be able to see that as a string from my guitar. What happened was I was turning the wrong knob, and this popped. So the intro music doesn't have a G chord, unfortunately, but we'll give it a go. Only bulls and horses. And that is our jingle. Right.
Can we cut bits out or not?
No, we can't, unfortunately. Annoyingly, and I'm deeply regretting doing that. But there we go.
We'll try to stop turning the wrong knobs from now on then.
Yeah, I will hopefully come out of this being a rock star.
Can you give us your review of Ollie's guitar playing, Goffy?
Yeah, we're short. I think we need to move on. Self-isolation seems to be affecting him not the best. You all right, Tom? Are you coping all right? Staying sane?
I'm getting there. I'm worried about how big my barnet's going to be at the end of this, because the thought of going to the hairdresser is horrible. So I'm genuinely concerned about the quiff abuse. But, we'll survive. You all right, mate? You turning around, Ollie? Ollie's just moving.
The bright sun's creeping in on me, so I'm going to move so I can... Yeah, there we go.
Giving us a tour of the bachelor pad. Lovely stuff.
Yeah, this is a good start. Should we get into some questions? Because loads of people have been in touch.
So a lot of you have been in touch with what's going to happen with Ante-post bets. I know that obviously Goppy's got a few positions. Sadly, for much of our Cheltenham punting, Cheltenham went ahead, so we're not going to get that money back. But there you go. Stuart Akister kicks off. Thanks for getting in touch. So if the National League is voided, as has been suggested, can I claim back my losing football bets from the season? If I backed, say, Stockport to win one Saturday and they lost, well, if the season is voided, the league is saying that game never happened. Nick Goff.
No will be the short answer to that. That if individual matches have been played and settled, even if the season's voided, that they'll be counted, and the bets will stand as they are, because it'll be unworkable. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get, if a punter's back to winner, the bookmaker's not going to be able to claim that money back off them. So everything that's been played and settled is as settled. But there is one case where losing bets may end up will have to be refunded. Is, say the FA Cup gets cancelled and you backed Tottenham to win the FA Cup and they got knocked out. Well, if there's no winner, there's 8 teams left. If you're going to avoid the bets remaining on those 8 teams, you've got to avoid the bets on everyone that played in it, because that's not fair. Because you couldn't win if you backed Tottenham. You literally couldn't win, because even if you're still in, you're going to get your money back.
But is that not the same for the leagues? So because if there's no
So
winner in the league,
leagues, yeah. So we're going to get on to what's going to happen with the individual leagues. That'll be the same. So if you've backed, not that anyone will have, but if you back Norwich to win the Premier League, mathematically they can't. But if the whole thing was voided, then you'd have to pay refunds on all of those bets, not just the teams that are still in contention. You'd have to be on all of them. I guess during the course of the next hour or so, we're going to get on to the likelihood of things being voided, things being finished somehow, bookmakers finding a way to possibly settle things if they're not quite finished. For example, I guess everyone will just pay out on Liverpool. But if you pay out on Liverpool, how does it? What are you going to do in other leagues?
yeah, do you pay out on Leeds?
Where's the dividing line? Do you pay? You can't really pay out on Leeds because they're only like 1 to 2 or something when it's suspended, weren't they? Like 2 points clear.
Yeah.
But Norwich relegation, if that's 1 to 8, should you pay out on that? And how much? Bookmakers are in hard times themselves. How many like complimentary free payouts should they have to give? Their own livelihoods on the line here as well. Not for the big 4 or 5 bookies. Obviously, they're going to survive it fine. But if you move down into the 6th, 7th, 8th biggest bookmakers, you might see. We had a question in from your man Icy Tentacles on Twitter. Very funny guy, by the way. We all know who he is. Naughty little Irishman, but a funny chap. Who asked, "Will you're not missing that much, really?" But he is a good guy. Who asked, will we see any bookmaker go bust as a result of everything that's happening in the world at the moment? And the answer probably is yes. There's likely to be a smaller bookmaker who just can't withstand this. Will it happen to one of the bigger firms? Almost certainly not. And we have seen William Hill's share price take a massive dive, and it looked pretty worrying. But at this stage, I'd say I wouldn't have any fears about. I wouldn't have many fears about a firm the size of William Hill disappearing, because if they even got into much more bother, then there would be some sort of buyout or merger option available to them. They're too big, I would have thought, to just disappear. So for mine at the moment, and that's a conversation I've been having with other people recently, if you've got money in betting accounts with big companies, that wouldn't be top of the list of my priorities to worry about. Obviously, you can withdraw it if you need to.
Can I just, from your former days in the sort of Coral offices as the football trader that you were in your former life, what would be going on now when this sort of news was breaking that this was a possibility, games would be suspended? Are they going through every possible option, and what are the options that they'll be discussing?
So I'd like to think that there's been some sort of joined up industry-wide chat between trading heads at the big firms of like, what might we be able to do here? And if that's not happened already, it ought to happen in a couple of weeks' time, because I think the running theme throughout all the things we're going to talk about today is in 2 or 3 weeks' time, we'll all have a better picture of where the world's heading. Is this going to be a really, really bad thing, but normal life might resume in 3 months? Or is this going to be the worst thing you could ever imagine, and we're still on lockdown, to use that phrase, in 9 months' time? That, if this is the worst case scenario, that could happen. But equally, if this isn't worst case scenario, we could see sport starting to return in May, and there's obviously a spectrum of options in between those two poles. So until we get to mid-April and we're starting to see where the spot, where the worst point is, and when we start to move back towards zero, if you like, when we get over the biggest part of the hump, or thought we have, then we'll start to be able to make plans, and bookmakers will, and the FA will, and UEFA will, etc., and racing will, for when we can get back. But for me at the moment, I'm almost like, I want to sit it out. I know there are markets on when things will get settled or when things will get back to normal. And if you've got a view, have a bet. But for mine at the moment, I'd rather just wait. And this is what I would love to be able to advise the FA and UEFA, and I think actually they're smart enough to know it. Don't make any rash decisions for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Let's just wait and see how things are going, and then we'll start to get a sense of, can we get stuff finished or not. What was your question?
Me? Whether those discussions are taking place? Just as an extension to that, extension of the question, how likely do you see it, again keeping your sort of former bookmaking hat on, that they will pay out on in current positions? And I mean, obviously, say the league's avoided and it's just like a blank count. There's so many sort of hypotheticals, obviously, I know.
Yeah.
But is that a strong possibility?
So I think they need to be really careful if they don't finish the leagues with using the word void. Because if I'm Sky TV and I've paid billions of pounds to show the Premier League this year, and it's called void, I'd probably argue that I want a massive chunk of that money back. So that would be that'll be, these things are going to be forefront. Financial issues are going to be forefront in especially the Premier League's thinking. And if they were to announce promotions and relegations based on an unfinished season, it's going to lead to legal action.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you don't announce promotion and relegation based on what's happened so far, we're talking about teams like Leeds, then that's also going to lead to potential legal action. So it's a massive mess. And I think the best case scenario would be that we can get it all, that we can find a way to get it done. And from speaking to people who know people, I get the sense that the Premier League's attitude is, we're going to fight, if we can, we will find a way to get this done. And all of the stumbling blocks, like player contracts that will expire at the end of June, they'll find a way to get over them if they can, to get it, and everything on the table, from hiring 2 Premier League grounds close together and getting everyone in one area and playing the games in 2 pitches behind closed doors every 3 or 4 days till you get it done. That kind of thing has been discussed. Whether it's going to be possible or not, we won't know for 2 or 3 weeks, because we don't know whether we're just at the beginning of this or whether we're about to get to midpoint. And everyone's got their own opinions on that. But even the government are guessing a little bit, so are we.
Are we not at a point where legal action from some clubs somewhere is basically unavoidable, because it's going to be impossible to keep everyone happy? And if the Premier League is finished somehow, because they have the ability, the wherewithal to be able to finish the season, the money, etc., surely that is unfair with the knock-on effect of relegation and promotion up from the Championship, etc. Because if they can't finish, surely it can't be one rule for the Premier League and one rule for the rest, doesn't it? Don't all the leagues have to be taken into account because of their affiliation with each other?
Yeah, so it's a pyramid, and they've already announced that the step 7, so that's from the Northern League and the Isthmian League and those 3 in that tier are being void and results expunged. So there will be no promotion to the National League North and South. And already South Shields, who are 12 points clear in the Northern League, have hinted at legal action. And I understand that, because these clubs, even clubs like that, invest heavily in relative terms in their playing squad to get themselves promoted. And now it seems no promotion place was ever available. So they want some sort of compensation for that investment. What's going to be interesting is the public opinion on things like that. We could have thousands of people dying, and to hear of football clubs wanting to sue to protect their own position may leave a bitter taste in so many millions of people's mouths that clubs might be hesitant to do that kind of thing. But if your club's existence is at stake, as it will be in certain cases, you may have no other option. So you could be getting an incredible mess. What I'd like to hope will happen is that things start to peter out in a few weeks' time, and there are ways to get games back in May or June in professional leagues behind closed doors, and then maybe by July or August properly. But I might be being very optimistic there, and too optimistic, but I don't know. That's the best case scenario, isn't it now?
Just to move on through some questions, because we've had loads. Thank you for the response. There's been an absolute bundle. You're obviously as bored as we are. David Johnson. Hiya, David. On the assumption that sport remains off limits for another 11 weeks, we kind of answered this, I think. How should the seasons proceed? We'll come to that on racing as well. And how should the bookmakers settle Ante-post bets? Is that directly connected with regards to bookmakers can only decide on how to settle Ante-post bets based upon what is allowed to be played out?
Yeah, so his point about it being another 11 weeks, the 11 weeks is just finger in the air stuff at the moment, isn't it? 11 weeks is what's being talked about for the vulnerable being locked down at the moment. But even that will change on government advice in time to come. The other thing is, of course, the FA and the Football League, the Premier League, can't make their decision on return in isolation. It will depend on what UEFA say and what other national leagues do. Italy's obviously the worst hit at the moment. Say Serie A and La Liga both decide to cancel their leagues, and they're going to target starting their new season in August as they usually would. And then UEFA give their blessing to that. And as a result, say that next season's Champions League and Europa League will start at the same time that it was going to. And we're going to try and get back to normal next season. The Premier League can't then say, well, we're going to finish our league in July and August, because the Champions League will be starting in July and August, and we'd need to give our nominations of which teams were representing us, and we won't have them. So in that case, it would be impossible for the Premier League to say that we're going to finish our league irrespective of what everyone else is doing because of the knock-on effects. In terms of how bookmakers settle Ante-post bets, we touched on that earlier. If we assume that the biggest bookmakers make a profit from Ante-post football betting, now the smaller firms often don't. It's harder than punters understand to make money as a bookmaker on Ante-post. Then it's not a golden goose. The biggest firms, because of the amount of normal recreational business they've got and ACCA business that they'll be getting, will be making a profit from it. But the smaller firms find Ante-post hard to make money on, and a lot don't. So if we take the starting point of the biggest 5 or 6 bookmakers will make a profit from it, it's in their interests to try to find a way to settle everything if they can. And then bearing in mind what I said about the word void maybe not being used because of knock-on effects to Sky TV and things like that, will there be some kind of settlement on what's happened already? Well, if there's going to be no promotion and relegation, no. The answer to that would be no. So getting back to Ollie's question, are bookmakers discussing these things already? If they haven't, they ought to be in a couple of weeks' time, because I'm sure it would be in everyone's interest to have an industry standard response rather than every bookmaker making a decision for themselves about what they're settling, what they're voiding, which ex gratia payments they're making, like paying out on Liverpool, because everyone will pay out on Liverpool if they win the league. But how far should bookmakers go from that? And I'm very much in the, bookmakers shouldn't be having to give a load away in these cases, because everyone likes to see the bookmaker as a villain, but they've got to eat too.
And with regard to both of you who have got positions on the football season, Gunn says Ante-post bets you'd be glad to be shot of, devastated to lose, etc. Where are you? I mean, I know, OB, you were in quite a nice position at one stage with a few of them, but I don't know what that looks like now. But
it looks terrible now.
Everything you want, yeah, it is now. But do you want everything settled?
My position is based on Goffey's advice.
Yep.
And I backed Leeds at the start of the season, Swindon at the start of the season, each way at 16-1, and Portsmouth in League One. Now, the ideal scenario for me would be that they pay out on Leeds and Swindon winning and they void League One. But I don't think that's going to happen. The thing is that even if, in terms of what I outlaid and what I would win, even if they completed all the leagues and Leeds were to win, Swindon were to finish tailed, which is unlikely, I would still make more than if they void all my bets Ante-post at the start of the season. So I do want the season to play out, but there's also an element of me sort of accepting the circumstances for what it is and going, there's not an awful lot we can do about this if indeed, as Goffey says, UEFA say this, X, Y, Z. Like, it's just such an unforeseen circumstance that I've kind of, in my head, and I think this is probably the best way to be, I've kind of just gone, I'm getting my stake back from the original bets, and anything I get on top of that would be a bonus, because otherwise I think if I'm counting the potential winnings or whatever, I'm going to be disappointed if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think you've got to put self-interest to one side and try to find the right answer for for bookmakers and punters alike. And that's the tough bit at the moment, without knowing what could happen, when it could happen, how a season could potentially finish. I think bookmakers would mostly like to get things settled if they could. Punters would mostly like to get things settled because if you back Tottenham to win the FA Cup and they've been knocked out, as I used in the earlier example, most punters are fair-minded people and are of the view that they don't deserve that money back. You have backed a loser, and that's the same with. But that same punter on the other side of the coin, if they're on Leeds to win the Championship at 6-1 or whatever they opened, and they're now 1-2. Even given the circumstances, that will great if you only end up getting your money back. Now, if that's the only option that becomes available, then that'll be what it is. But there are other factors you could look at, like a proportional cash out price, if you like. So taking the prices that every team was when things shut down and settling based on the true odds at the time everything shut down. So if you back something at 10-1 and the current price is evens, you might get paid out at 5-1 proportionately, based on the true value of that bet. So that's something that everyone could look at, because the cash out values are available on these Ante-post bets, or were. All bookmakers obviously turned them off, which was the right thing to do once the uncertainty started to arise. But that's one way they could look at dealing with them.
That's answered a lot of the betting, a lot of the football ones as well. More generally, Joe says, if you were running a betting company with total freedom, what markets would you be offering right now to keep turnover ticking over? And just on that, I suppose you can branch out into what are we punting at the moment? And personally, there's nothing for me to gamble on, zero. And I'm not going to jump into the poker world, although I've quite enjoyed watching Ollie's exploits in that world recently. But we'll come to that shortly. Goffey, are you punting any sports internationally at the moment, or any esports, or people playing chess, or what?
If you told me I was even going to say this 6 months ago, I'd have laughed you out of town. But there was the Leyton Orient Twitter site started everyone would have seen this, a FIFA tournament on the computer thing. And some teams have used their own esports pros to play. Some have got players from the team to play. And like 5 or 6 bookmakers priced up the first round of this, and didn't do a great job of it, because there were these like actual professional FIFA players going up against pro footballers and being like 4-9 to beat them, when they should be like 1,000 on.
It's like
you can't get very much money on these things, so it's kind of for fun, but you could get bets on them, and it was like massively wrong. So I did spend the past weekend going through who was playing for each team, if you could find the info, and looking for the prices and trying to get some bets on them, as much for, obviously wanting to win some money at the moment, but as much to keep me sane and have me like using my brain. But with like all of these things, the values in the first round, and bookmakers become clued up from the second round onwards. So it was a short window of opportunity, but there was a chance to make some money from a bleeding computer tournament. I was watching a bit of racing when it was on from Ireland, and then from South Africa until the other day when that was off. There's literally nothing. Now, I'm not going to watch American racing in the evenings, because the evenings you can find something to watch on TV and have a glass of wine, can't you? But I had the South African racing on the other afternoon and had a couple of small bets out of boredom. But the answer really is no. There's nothing to do. I've kind of accepted 2 to 3 month shutdown now. But who hasn't? Most people in work have done the same. So,
and that's the thing as well. I think that whilst this is obviously a sport and gambling based podcast, but ultimately you're a professional punter who's accepting that the next 2 to 3 months of our life are not in any way how we imagine them to be. The income streams are not in any way what you imagine them to be. And there are lots of people who don't bet, who are going through exactly what we are all going through, what everyone else in the country is going through. And there has to be a level of sort of acceptance of that, and just lock down, get through it, and hope everyone, the damage, the impact of this disease is as minimal as possible to everyone in every walk of life, to bookmakers, to punters, to everyone up and down the country. I think it's for all of us. I mean, for Tom and I, we're not presenting racing because there's no racing to present. So in terms of our income, it's not there as well. So it's just a really, really crap time, isn't it? And I know that it's a cliche, but as you said earlier, there's people dying out there. So it's what we're talking about in the reality of things is relatively irrelevant. It's important in our little world, and I think it's important to update punters who have an interest on what happens to their bets, etc., in this little bubble. But we are well aware of the bigger ramifications outside of the bubble.
Yeah, and I think just talking about sport with your mates and doing podcasts and things like that helps to keep us all sane. We all know there's a bigger picture. It almost goes without saying.
Yeah.
You've got the news that you can't have missed it. This is the worst thing of our lifetime now, by a mile.
Yeah.
And it's just literally incredible. So talking about how sport will look when it returns is kind of a way for us all to keep ourselves sort of on the straight and narrow, isn't it? And not just go off the rails and neck 2 bottles of red every night.
It's so difficult when like you say. I mean, we talked about 3 weeks, then 11 weeks. I mean, we don't have we have no authority on when it's going to return. And I think everyone on people who love sport, who watch sport, who bet on sport, people participating in the sports, football clubs, racing yards, what they really want more than anything, which is almost impossible, is an exact date. I know we've got a date for racing in the UK at the moment, but a date where people a realistic date where they can go, right, let's work towards that. But it's a complete guess up at the moment, which is what makes it so difficult, I think.
I didn't really, obviously we all knew and all know how much of a part sport has played in our life, but you really miss it when it's not there. Like you almost take it for granted. Like, most of my conversations with my friends are about sport. Most of my activities are outside playing sport. Obviously my job is in a sport. Like, sport ultimately is our life, really. And without it, it's a very, very dull world.
He's a boxer, Goffey, Ollie. Do you know?
Sorry?
Boxer. Does a bit of boxing.
Yeah, boxer, yeah. I went to his only bout, and it didn't go so well, really.
My next fight, the tagline is going to be "Someone's O has got to go," and that means the O in the win column has got to go. Yeah, we got through that. Do you know what's nice though? What's nice is the amount of people who have engaged with us on Twitter when we said we were coming back on and doing this podcast, because as you say, Goffey, there is a real desire, I guess, for normalcy in many ways, and us to talk about sport and possible outcomes. But there's so many questions, aren't there, Tom, that we've had in.
So James Knight has said, betting in general, is the growing moral outrage relating to gambling going to intensify during and post this crisis? I fear it may well do personally. I mean, that's the way that it's going anyway. As we're becoming greener, betting is coming under more and more scrutiny. Possibly, I don't know, that off the back of this, people will look at betting and say, well, why are people worried about that when, as you say, there have been deaths, there have been much bigger things going on, and now betting, which can lead to so many issues to so many people, that should be cracked down upon more off the back of this. I don't know, but I see where James is coming from.
Yeah, I think interesting point. And actually, the person who asked the question, James Knight, is probably the best place to answer it than any of us three. And that gave me a thought that if we were going to do one of these again next week, because we had a question in from Neil Channing as well. And people like James Knight and Neil Channing, if we could twist their arm, we should get them to dial in for 10 minutes and chat to us and get some other people in betting and punting on and have a chat. James would need his arm definitely twisted because he hates stuff like this, but I reckon I could talk him into it.
Challenge on. For those that don't know, James is the Coral. He's head of trading there.
Yeah, so yes, we've been moving down this track towards moral outrage in terms of betting and gambling, and some of the papers have really taken it on as almost like a crusade. So problem gambling will always be now at the forefront of people's discussions when gambling is talked about in the media, and that's fine, and it really should do. Will it, sort of intensify? The government are bailing people out here, both employed and self-employed, giving people their wages. Should they then be allowed to go and gamble that money? This is a moral question that bookmakers are going to have to look at and tread really carefully with. Or will it go sort of the other way? And will there be a bigger picture? We might come through this with thousands of people having lost their lives. And will the bigger picture be, let's look at how we make people safe, in health terms, and actually is someone betting 50 quid on a Saturday when they earn 250 and losing it not ideal, but actually not the worst thing on the planet right now. I guess it's more likely to go slightly the first way and lead us further down that moral path against gambling, which we'll see. But it's an interesting question from James, and actually we probably should have got his views on it.
One of the things that I think I've spoken to you about in the past, Goffey, is obviously the government have looked into a lot of, I mean, in other jurisdictions as well. In Italy, the approach to gambling, sponsorship of football clubs is non-existent anymore, etc. Government, in terms of in this country, advertising pre a certain time is under scrutiny and constantly under review. But I find it personally, I find it to a certain extent slightly hypocritical for those that are outraged by gambling, and I'm aware that there is a problem for many, and I'm incredibly supportive of that. But you can not watch a gambling advert, or they ban gambling advert, but you can watch an advert for a drinks company or what have you. Because ultimately, when there is something such as gambling, drinking, something that can lead to an addiction, there will be people, just by the very nature of how humans are made up, that aren't able to cope with it and become addicted, and it is just a destructive influence on their life. And is gambling not just something that leads to addictions for a very small percentage, which obviously we need to be responsible about, but by cracking down on it to the level in which I've heard some people talk about that they want it to be cracked down, is actually really, really dangerous in a way. It will be very destructive for a lot more people.
I think there needs to be sensible people looking at this and coming up with decisions and conclusions, because some of the so was there too much gambling advertising around live sport for a lot of years? Yes, there was. And a crackdown on that, and it being on at times when kids could see it and that kind of thing, at a time when all the kids have got mobile phones and things now, that had to happen, and that was long overdue. But then I've seen things recently about people suggesting, because of the times we're in right now, the government should put a cap of £50 deposit on all betting accounts, so people can't bet, enforced by the government, can't bet more than £50 of their own money during the next few months because of what's happening, to safeguard people with problems, etc. I'm all for safeguarding people with problems, but you do have to balance that out with the thousands and millions of people out there that can bet without it becoming a problem, whose freedom would be removed in that circumstance. So, and obviously you can't just, the parallels with drinking, smoking can be a bit too simplistic, but we know people who can't drink to a moderate extent and therefore have had to, either get help or stop themselves from drinking, etc. You don't stop the rest of us from drinking.
Yeah, if an alcoholic walked into a pub, the landlord would go, "Sorry, mate, I'm not serving you," but he wouldn't clear out the whole pub.
Exactly, and yeah, so that point is fair, albeit there are caveats to it, and gambling is different, but yeah, so we have to be careful, and the industry needs to go about this really carefully, and know where it needs to stand up for itself and where it needs to back down and just say, yeah, okay, that's fair cop.
How concerned are you as a pro punter about what is being discussed in government? What James the point James is making about the sort of weight of momentum behind gambling as being a problem.
Yeah, there is a possibility that if it goes so far a certain way, it will potentially prevent me from earning an income. Now, I don't think completely, because if you bet if you bet in foreign countries and Asian markets and things like that, they'll continue to exist, but there may be things put in place that prevent professional gamblers doing some of the things they do right now, and that could lead to people like me who haven't worked for nearly 5 years being in a position where they can't really earn as much money as they're used to, and no one really wants to employ them anymore because they haven't done anything for 5 years. So that's a bit of a concern, but it's not something that keeps me up at night. You can only deal with what's going on and crack on, really. But yeah, the landscape of betting is massively changing, and as James has pointed out, this can only lead to it changing more. How?
Have you ever thought about taking up what you used to do before you started trading? Stripping.
Excellent, yeah.
Dust off the bow tie again. Get Butler in the buff.
He was a Butler in the buff, wasn't he? Not many people know.
No one knows that, but he was, yeah.
That's not true.
Do you have a stage name?
I used to work in a Tesco petrol station when I was doing my A-levels. That's the last job I had that wasn't betting related.
Yeah. You got sacked because you wore a bow tie and pants.
Next question.
He hates that.
It's dangerous to take Goffey on early on in the podcast because
I know.
Just silliness. The public aren't enjoying it.
They're loving it. Oh, that image. Anyway, next question.
Let's go with Stuart, who says the possibility of very little pre-season in either football or NFL. Yeah, this is interesting. It relates to another question we've had about Liverpool being backable next season based on what little will have to go on pre-season, etc., or without the finish to this season. Will usual heavy favourites be ripe for laying, or do you think the market will factor this in correctly? So turning ahead to next season, are we in danger of you not being able to have any concrete opinions on what prices football teams should be in all the relevant leagues because we'll have very little to go on?
Well, I'll have concrete opinions, but they'll just be based on things that were different to what you usually would. I'll still find a way to formulate a view and put some prices to things. It's just that corona factors will be now at the forefront of everyone's thinking. So the first thing on Stuart's question is, we don't know how long seasons are going to be next year yet. Are they going to be a normal length? Because obviously one thing that could happen, I wouldn't say it's the most likely, but could happen, is that we finish the season over the summer, we have a short break, and we start the season again a bit later, September, October, whenever, start a new season. In that scenario, will we have a slightly shortened season? Will they scrap the cup competitions to allow you to get the league played? Or if we start a lot later, so we couldn't start until Christmas, could you have a 19-game Premier League season instead of a 38-game season where everyone just plays each other once? I don't think that's very likely, but everything's on the table. In that scenario, of course, in a 19-game season, it's a lot higher variance. So your Leicesters and your Evertons and your Wolves would have much more chance of winning a Premier League, or certainly finishing in the top 4 of a Premier League, than they would over the full sample size of a normal season. Most of the time, a bookmaker's going to figure that out and factor that into their prices. But there will definitely be some scenarios that arise where a bookmaker hasn't factored in potential randomness to the right extent. And it will be much harder to price these things. And the harder it becomes to price things, the more mistakes get made. The Liverpool. So Jason R asked a question, didn't he, about Liverpool's odds for next season? Would they be different based on whether this season finishes or not? I don't think they'll change too much based on whether the season actually ends, because we all know they were going to win it this year anyway.
Would Man City be fabs if you were pricing up the Premier League starting tomorrow, full game of full 38?
With the same squads?
I mean, obviously, but come towards the end of the season, Liverpool will essentially won the league. Would Man City be fabs if you were pricing up today?
I probably would have had City slight fabs over Liverpool. Yeah, they were getting closer together. As you know, it went at Christmas time, and Liverpool are 20 clear. Still made City a fair favourite, and actually I've got them closer together as the season came to its premature halt. But the things we're going to have to factor in are how are owners affected. The Liverpool owners own Boston Red Sox as well. America could be absolutely crippled by this, the rate they're moving at the moment. So will there be a financial effect on Liverpool's owners? Might they need to sell a couple of key players short to medium term to see through their financial situations? I have no idea, by the way, and that's pure speculation, but something that will need to be considered. Man City's owners, with all of the oil money, or all of the money from that part of the world that they have, how affected are they? They might be able to still go and buy players who are now available a bit more cheaply because the market's crashed, might see it as an opportunity to go and buy out the best players in the world. I have no idea that will be the case, but these are things that we'll have to factor. So certain clubs' owners will be in different positions to others. Wolves are owned by a massive Chinese conglomerate. How is this affecting them? I support them, but I don't even really know the answer to that. So corona factors are going to be massive in trying to get a handle on what price teams should be for next season. The other thing to finish the Liverpool question that he asked was, it's the African Cup of Nations next January, and 2 of Liverpool's most important 3 players would be going to that for a month in January. Will it still be on? Because if it's cancelled or moved, that would help them, obviously. If it goes ahead, and the way the season moves, more games have to be played in January than they would have done normally, that would hinder Liverpool even more. You might be a case where it's 25% of Liverpool's season is played without those players because they're somewhere else. Or the whole tournament might be scrapped and they might have the players for 100%. So there's going to be so many more factors than usual in trying to find a right price for teams next season.
And does that extend into the Euros now in 2021 in terms of what different leagues do in terms of fixture lists, etc., fresh teams as opposed to not fresh teams?
So I think it's too early to say how it will affect the Euros. because we don't know what, because you might have a full season leading into it, and you might actually go into the Euros in 2021 in 16 months' time, and Corona may have been out of our memory for 6 months by then, but it might not. I think we don't know. So one of the things, it's too early to look at now, but there might be countries whose players are going to peak in 12 months' time. Norway, I find an interesting example of this with Haaland. What sort of player is he going to look in 12 months' time? Sander Berge that went to Sheffield United. Norway have got a nice crop of young players coming through, and if they're at the Euros, that extra year might make them a better team than they would have been this summer. There are other teams, and I can't even give an example because I've not really spent any time on the Euros yet, and there's no point now because it's not happening. But there will be other teams with squads at an average age of 29, 30 who are going to be at a disadvantage by playing it in a year's time. But that's the way it is.
Have they voided bets on the Euros if you had them?
No, I don't think they have. Again, it would be nice to have an industry standard on this. I think a couple of firms have come.
Shouldn't they?
I think a couple of firms have come out and said that the bets will stand, and I'd be happy if all bets. What I think bookmakers ought to do in that case is say all bets stand unless you contact us and say you want yours void.
Give you the option, yeah, definitely.
I think that would be a fair way to handle Euros bets.
Isn't that because it's been postponed, so therefore the tournament's still going to take place in the same format? It's the same as, which we'll come on to, bets on certain races where entries have been canned now, but they're still likely to take place, so the bets still stand at the moment because they can still be played out.
Yeah, and I believe the format will still be the same in terms of the countries that it's been, because obviously this Euros is a multi-host event. Lots of different countries hosting it for the first ever time.
Perfect for a global pandemic.
Yes, and it was designed to be a celebration of the 60th anniversary, which will now be played after 61 years of UEFA.
Ideal.
So there was some thought that they might have been able to scrap all these games in all these countries and just have it in one country like they do any other time with the World Cup or Euros.
Or scrap the year when they were all corrupt and then just go back to it being 60 years.
They've sold all the tickets, haven't they? And I don't think they want to be refunding those and reselling them. So I think they'll probably try to keep it as it is. But I'm glad they made that decision to move it to next year quickly. And we're trying to discuss things from the best case scenario rather than from a selfish position. But as someone who has a baby due in 6 weeks and really wanted to heavily bet on the Euros, moving back a year is bloody good news for me.
Is that that noise that's your butler's chat room, is it? That you've still got?
Can you hear the noise in the background?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
Hunky Henry's messaging Goffy.
Yeah, that's the butlers are still here. They're still working.
Still yeah.
What other football questions have we got? Because Tom, I want to find out from you what the landscape is with the racing. But have we got more football?
One more football. We've sort of answered this in another form, but Richard Shepherd says lower league clubs will surely need to release players to ensure financial survival. How much of a factor will this be in assessing teams' chances for the 2021 season? Would club wealth be rated higher than previous seasons, or is that generally factored in?
Yeah, we touched on it. It's a very good question. The answer is, what I said, yeah, Corona-related factors will be more important than other things that you use. Any other analytics stats, XG, any other things like that you use to get an edge on the market or formulate your prices. Corona will be number one when we come to price things. How has that affected that club and the landscape in general? Bookmakers will know that, obviously, but I think there will be a bigger range of opinions on it. So,
like varying different prices.
Well, I think it will be possible before we go into the next season, whenever that is, for me to make a team, for the market to have a team 3s and for me to think they're 20s.
Right.
Which, I think that could, I'm guessing, but I think that kind of thing could really happen next summer, where that kind of thing can't really happen because the bookmakers have.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
That kind of stuff could, it could be a really, really interesting time to be pricing things and betting on things and formulating an opinion which may vary from the market and the general public and bookmakers.
For you, next year, you have a view, say it's the other way around, they price up a team at 20s, for example, you make them 6-1. The factors that you're using to get to that conclusion, there is an element of the corona cloud above it all. Do you increase your stakes, or because of the situation, are you going to be reticent to commit when you get back into the swing of things?
I would like to think that I will probably bet similar levels. That's such a good question, actually. And I really don't know the answer to it yet. But if that case arises where I make something 20s at 3s, and therefore something else I make huge value, I'm going to have to try to bet to at least the same extent I would usually, allowing for the extra variance that there is in. So an example of a team that I can say it now. There's no point keeping it up my sleeve because everything's changed. Spent the last 6-8 weeks just waiting to see what price Salford are going to be to win League Two next year, because that's top of my list of teams that I'm really expecting to invest a bit more over the summer and going the right way now. A lot of stability. Managers got them ready. It's almost like that the owners will have 1 year to stabilise in League Two, then we're going to have a crack at promotion. Now, all that's kind of out the window in terms of uncertainty, but I've been really waiting for that, and to the extent that I was kind of hoping they were going to lose games between now and May to not sort of give the game away, not finish too close to the playoff zone, because they wouldn't have gone up this year. But if they'd finished 8th,
pre-season fabs, weren't they, this year?
Yeah, they were pre-season fabs, but that was based on their name.
Right.
They just weren't good enough relative to the top 7, but they're now probably, I think I'd have rated, this is from memory, 5th or 6th by the beginning of March, when it all came to a halt. Probably like 5th or 6th best team in the league, and 4 of those are going to go up or were going to go up. So, and then the teams you're looking to come down, well, there's Bury aren't coming down because they don't exist. Bolton are going to come down skint. Salford could be a genuine 5-2, 11-4 shot here, which they might not open. But all that's irrelevant now.
And talking about owners and the wealth and all that, I mean, Gary Neville, who's got the hotel chains that he's put out on Twitter, it was an incredibly noble act of him. I think he was the first to say publicly that he's going to keep his staff paid, they're going to take paid leave, etc. Hotels will be turned, he will take a financial hit. I know that he's a well-off individual, but like you say, it's a massive unknown, isn't it? But that's interesting. I suppose the point is that despite everything that's going on, do you change the processes that have worked for you over a period of time? I know you've just answered it, but that's kind of the point I'm getting at, because there'll be people here going, right, we've had 3-4 months without an income, no sport to bet on, and we'll get onto this in terms of poker and tilting, chasing, however you want to dress it up.
Yeah.
You've just got to trust the process that works for you and stick to the methodology, irrespective of the circumstances. So
on the Gary Neville thing, I think that this world climate at the moment will magnify everything. Good people will come out of it looking really good, and bad people are going to come out of it looking bloody awful.
Yeah.
And that's the same as footballers for the world. And there are some people in football who are acting outside of self-interest, trying to do the right thing. Peterborough owner Darren McAntony on Twitter, trying to do nice things for people and sort of raise a sort of sense of community and do good stuff. Gary Neville, obviously.
Watford have put their stadium up for NHS workers.
Brighton offering tickets to the NHS workers, etc. When football returns. Good people are trying to do good things. I'm not going to name names, but there are a couple of people within the football world who aren't they?
Name names.
We want names.
What names?
Well, is Sports Direct open today or not?
Next question.
Moving on.
I think it probably is because it's an
I think he's up now
important.
because he realised that he'd dropped a welly. And
Again.
that nice lady that works for West Ham United came out and said that she thought the season should be voided very quickly, didn't she? When her team was in a relegation battle.
In
She's a
between
nice
filming
lady.
and Apprentice.
Nice lady.
Sports Direct would have been a good sponsor for us. They could still be.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you get in touch with Sports Direct.
I'll give Cashley a shout. See what he says. Right, just to move on to racing loosely from really what Goffey was saying, or from that question about how it changes the betting landscape. I mean, it could be with regards to the. I mean, if you're running Group 2-year-old races come mid-June, God knows if we're going to be, for horses that
First time out 2-year-olds in the Coventry. None of them have raced.
Massive guess up, and I don't know, and it could be the same for not just 2-year-old races, horses we haven't seen that season who are now in the middle of the season, but what is for them the start of the season. The shape of races is going to be changed so much that any way you'd normally approach a race betting wise is going to go out the window. And I think we're all going to be sat there going, can't wait to have a go because I haven't had a bet for such a long time, but equally going, shouldn't I be taking my foot off the gas here because of the unknown quantities going into it? But it's going to be difficult.
I think on that point, what's interesting is that, and I don't know what Goffey will make of this, but I totally get what you're saying. We will be in a position in June, say Royal Ascot, right? Hypothetically, no one knows the landscape, but say Royal Ascot is a week after racing regimes, and all these 2-year-old races, if they run them, have just first time out horses. For me, and I heard you talking about this with Tony Calvin on Racing UK the other day, when you said if a horse drifts a lot, there was a horse called Polites that won big drift, and you said, I was sort of a little bit put off backing it. It ended up bolting her. But I think the market will be incredibly accurate from sort of show to off about the sort of lines that you need to be following. So for me, I think the market would be more telling than I traditionally would let it impact on me, if that makes sense. I think a lot of times for 2-year-old races, even in normal circumstances, you can see when a horse is clearly a useful horse at home because the money comes for it pre-race, etc. I think you're going to get a scenario where lots of movements happen in the market because the bookies will be guessing, but the punters who'd see it at home probably won't be guessing as much as we think. So I'll probably be slightly changing my methodology and being far more aware of what is happening, or probably let the market moves influence me a bit more than they do normally. And I don't know whether Goffey thinks that's sensible or not, but I think it will be quite telling when we return with racing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what's the vibe racing on how the season could look? So say, obviously say the Guineas can't happen.
I've heard, I don't know whether it's true or not. Again, it's a bit like the stuff about the football season and options. There is an option. There is an argument for sort of making it regionalised. So big races that we miss in, say, May, for example, you will then run it all at Newbury start of June, and you piece together like the pattern races, for example, over a weekend. I don't know. You'd essentially have to change the whole programme under these exceptional circumstances, but there is a potential, I suppose, of staging Newbury, Sandown and Ascot races, not Royal Ascot, at Newbury over the course of a Friday, Saturday meeting, for example, and then you run your group races and your pattern races for the breed. That's obviously
you have to keep other horses in mind. Obviously, you can't just tailor everything around getting the elite horses out, because you're going to have a thousand horses at a lower level.
But then you could, and look, this is for much more intelligent people than me, but then you could have your all-weather racing churning out the sort of class 6 to class 3 races and Premier tracks. Premier tracks have the pattern. I don't know, but I can see that scenario actually working if we need to run group races.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Priority will be given to group races because in the flat season, they influence seasons. They form the whole structure of the season and everything that leads on from there, breeding, sales, etc. The whole backbone of season upon season of the flat season, more so than over in the jump season. Obviously, there are so many things will be affected. Prize money, because just to update on the guineas, in case anyone's wondering, entries for the 1,000 and 2,000 guineas, which have already closed, have been cancelled, and the races will provisionally be programmed to close at the 5 and 6 day stage now. So obviously prize money for that's going to be affected. We had a question in on Ante-post positions on that, by the way, and I think it's somebody said they've got a position on the 1,000 guineas. I think for where you are there, because it's still intended to be run, your bet still stands. For all officially as it stands, that horse isn't currently in the race. I cannot see, unless the whole of the flat season time-wise is completely canned. If we are racing at the back end of summer, I cannot see a situation where the Guineas and the Derby and things like that, perhaps a handful of Royal Ascot races, I can't see a position where they don't go ahead. I think they're so integral and important to the season. I think they will. And Nick Rust indicated on Luck on Sunday that the regional way of going about it, of racing behind closed doors, is very likely. I mean, Newmarket, for example, could be a huge benefactor of that, with the amount of yards around there, not exclusively to them, but the limiting of travel that would be required for horses to get to 2 different tracks that have a Newmarket. That could benefit greatly from that. So I think regional racing is going to be the starting point in the UK, or the most likely starting point. That, I think, answers a lot of questions as to how the season is going to look. Puntdemic got in touch. Good name, very apt name, unless you changed it recently. And the Northern Gamblers asked that as well. So I think that's how we sort of see the earliest parts of the season whenever it comes about again, it being in sort of regional format and them hosting the most important, most high-profile races because of how important they are to the flat season.
I think the landscape for racing for me is just so, I mean, no one knows when it's going to start. If it starts in September, who knows? I think it's interesting about the Guineas, what they've done there, but racing is a big question mark at the moment in terms of how it looks when we return and when we return. So,
can you see any scenario where something is devised out of hardship, out of crisis like now, that works so well that there's almost there's a sense that it needs to become like the thing you mentioned earlier, Tom, about having a weekend at Newbury running a load of group races, something like that. There's a chance, and this is not just racing specific, this could happen in all sports, that the public love that so much.
Yeah.
So it's like, we need to do that more.
I was thinking, yeah, definitely. But obviously we don't know until it plays out. But I think there's going to be, not just in football and racing, I think across all sports where they go, actually, we've been getting it wrong for the last 100 years. This is actually a slightly better way of doing things.
The thing that made me think of that was this the idea that you might have a half football season, like a 19-game Premier League season.
Yeah.
And because you can only start at Christmas or something. And I got to thinking, that could be so exciting.
Yeah.
A season where you just play each other once, promotion, more teams could win the league because it's over a shorter period of time. The relegation battle on the final day could have 8 teams in it, that kind of stuff. It could be so exciting, almost by mistake, that everyone's like, well, why don't we just do that every year and have 2 seasons every year? And it would like completely revolutionise, because some South American countries do that anyway. It would this virus could revolutionise many sports and the world for the better in the long term, as well as potentially for the worse if things go bust, people aren't around, whatever. So this is going to change the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what we're doing on this podcast.
Change everything.
Podcast by podcast.
I want to answer Neil Channing's question. He says, any views on racing to resume before the 1st of May market? Assuming this is on Betfair, it's moved from 1.1 to 1.22 in recent days, now back to 1.16. Any reasons to be optimistic? Any insights as to what caused fluctuation other than a liquid market being volatile? I think that latter point is very apt. I don't know how much you'd use that as I thought the the Will Cheltenham go ahead market was really interesting when it was reacting to news, but I don't know how much do you guys use that as a strict guide on the likeliness of anything? How well informed do you think those markets are?
I thought it was one of the most interesting markets ever. And I saw a lot of people argue the prices are garbage because it's just people guessing. But it was the best gauge to whether racing would go ahead that there was. Because that amount of money being backed and laid, there has to be some informed. I think people that backed them not to go ahead at a pretty big price early on were extremely unlucky. Because if it was 5 days later, it couldn't have happened, could it?
Mm.
But I thought it was a really interesting market, and I thought it was a good gauge of at all stages whether it's going to go ahead or not. Because it drifted out. I don't know if it ever got odds against, but it got out to about 4 to 5, didn't it, for a couple of days when you thought Cheltenham really looked dodgy.
Yeah, it was very close at one stage. And then we were all going, well, that's it, it's going to be canned, but it survived. He also says, should the World Snooker Championship take place behind closed doors? I don't know. Are there any sports that really lend themselves to going ahead?
You could play darts, right? So you could have me here playing darts, throwing 3, get the score. You there playing your 3, and then you just mark the score off. Like darts could actually.
That's the obvious one, isn't it? You could play darts in your front room. And
yeah,
there was talk of Taylor and Barneveld having a charity match for old time's sake in their own lounge.
I thought they're doing that, aren't they?
Well, it's been discussed. I don't know. Is it on? I know it was discussed.
I'd be amazing. Like, just get that on and play that every day.
And I think someone asked, what would you? We had a question in, what would you do if you were a bookmaker and you didn't have any constraints? Well, I'd get the 16 best players in the world and sponsor a tournament between all of them for their own living rooms and price all those matches. That'd get me some betting turnover if I was allowed to do something like that.
This is a good idea. Putting this out. This is actually a really good idea. I like it.
No, they should do it, and they've probably looked at it, but it's hard to get it set up, or they don't want to upset the Guardian and stuff doing betting related stuff right now. If I was still involved in a betting company, I'd have a webcam outside my house and I'd be betting yes or no, and then the next person to walk past, male or female. I'd be punching everything. Not allowed to anymore. It's 2020. It's not 2002 now, is it?
You'd have to have a market for people that refer to themselves as they. You couldn't just be male.
Yes, you would these days, wouldn't you? Yeah.
3 or 5.
Yeah. Can you price that up for us? Post on the Only Balls and Horses.
There's like a little 4-way junction at the end of the street where walkers can walk 4 different directions. So if you left that webcam on for 24 hours, you could do the form yourself.
Can I tell you a great story about I heard this about a professional punter of a cricket match, and he was a professional cricket punter, and you could bet on play going ahead or completed match, and there was a webcam set up outside Lord's or the Oval, one of them, and the forecast was really bad, but it wasn't raining, and my mate was living sort of next door to the ground. So what he did was he walked past the webcam with an umbrella up, and the market just got a load of his face with an umbrella, and then he did back completed match yes, and just so good. I got a lot of time for that. Should we talk about poker? We had any poker questions in? Because is there more racing?
Let's finish off racing. There's just one more very quick, and I appreciate this has become just 3 guys talking utter shite. But
what do they expect though?
Hey?
This does exactly what it says on the tin, unfortunately.
Hussein says any racecourse is vulnerable to closure. Musselburgh, I suppose, their current license is due to expire at the end of the month. It's been extended, everything they need to do, so they're going to be all right. But some tracks, the chairman of HRI was saying how worried he was, Brian Kavanagh, about the Irish tracks. In the 23 fixtures that have been closed, they can lose over €1 million, I think. Newton Abbott, for example, is meant to get started. They could be in big trouble, of course. And the other thing is that racecourses also operate as conference centres, loads of different things, nurseries. None of that can happen. So the long and the short of it is, I think there are some tracks who will be in
racecourses and nurseries.
Could close. Hey?
What racecourses are nurseries?
Newbury have got one.
Shut up. Do they?
Newton Abbott.
How do you know this?
I'm worried why I know this so well. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like every business, though, isn't it? Every business is under pressure and at risk of folding through this, and racecourses are no different.
Talking of folding, let's do poker. Right, this is something we can bet on. So Tom got in touch and said, any views on the recent poker boom? Have you ventured back into the game? So as somebody that tried online poker for a few evenings when I was about 19 and lost a lot of money because I was getting in really pissed and trying to play and thinking I was good and I was shite, and I've never done it again. Can we have the Nick Goff Ollie Bell guide to dipping your toe back into online poker, please, Ollie?
So to put it into context, when I was 21, I played poker online and live on the circuit for 2 years. I was backed by someone and did quite well. And then I had a decision to make whether to go down the presenting route properly or whether to take poker seriously.
Bad choice.
And I made a terrible decision. No, and then I went to Australia and didn't play poker for about 6 or 7 years seriously. And actually, I was looking at my stats the other day, Shark Scope and whatnot, official poker rankings that don't actually get PokerStars stats anymore. But looking at them, and my profit went from a good number, and just from tipping away and not sort of concentrating at it and just playing the odd game here and there, over the last 6-7 years, it's sort of decreased a lot. And then when this happened, I thought, shit, like we're all in trouble here. How am I going to make money? And I thought, let's see if I can. And in my head, I thought, and I don't know whether Nick thinks the same. In my head, there were two factors as to why my profit decreased. One, and I don't want to sound flippant here, but I probably wasn't taking it as seriously as I should have done. And two, I kind of didn't have the patience to do it when I had other things going on, etc. So to me, it was just not as appealing as it was when I was taking it seriously. I'm waffling, so I'll be quick. Having basically been faced with a situation where you need the money, essentially, and you need to concentrate, you need something to do, etc. I started playing poker again in the last 2 weeks. Gave myself a bankroll, which we'll get onto with Goffey, which is really important to talk about. And got pretty unlucky in some tournaments, cashed for small amounts in a few others. And then recently, last couple of nights, I've won a couple of tournaments and now can be in a position to start to take it for the time that we're in isolation seriously with a decent bankroll to play with. What it taught me was that, or what I've learned over the last 2 weeks, is that one, I can still compete in a game online, which is encouraging. And two, you have to be disciplined with it. You can't just sort of turn up, go, oh, just play for a bit of fun. Like if you want to do it, or you can do it for a bit of fun, but if you want to do it in the way I want to do it, you have to be disciplined. Bankroll management's important, and you can't get frustrated with bad beats, which I was at the start of this process letting myself get, because it is a frustrating game at times. So yeah, I really enjoy the game. I find it a really good way to pass time, and if you can play an opportunity still to make money. And I don't know what Nick thinks about it, but that's my sort of outlook on it. There's a few other points I'll make about it in a moment, but Goffey, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I used to play a lot up until about 2014. And so you mentioned a couple of factors there. One, I stopped taking it as seriously because my football betting started to go, much bigger. And then I was just playing poker a little bit on the side. And then if you're playing poker online and you're doing other things online at the same time, you can spend an hour sitting at a table and then look at that table after an hour and think, I don't actually know anything about any of these people I'm playing against here. And that long term is a sign that you shouldn't be playing.
Yeah.
But the one thing you didn't mention was that around that time as well, the game got a lot harder.
It did get a lot harder, but I was surprised that coming back into it as I have in the last few weeks, I can still compete, because to me, I'm just not on the level now anymore.
So that's the bit I wanted to talk about, is that
finding your level.
If you get back involved in poker, having been out of the game for a long time, don't fall for that. You can just pick it up from where you were and carry on as you were, because A, the game's changed, B, you're out of practice. So you need to dip your toe in first, I think, at a much lower level, whether that's cash or tournaments, than you were playing at previously. That coupled with the fact that online poker is going to have a rebirth now, and there are going to be a lot more people playing than there used to be, means that you'll go into these cash games or tournaments, wherever you want to play, at a lower level than you used to play at, and you'll find more regs there, more recreationals there than the old pros that you used to be up against. So I think you can get back involved. And the other thing that's really important to do is to try to find some try to work out where the softer games are.
Mm.
And I found one, and I went and told you, didn't I? I'm not putting it on here, but there are places out there where you may find games that are softer than other places. So if you find one of those, keep it to yourself and play in them.
You told me though. Thank you.
For a novice, how do you identify that? How is that easy for you to identify?
You go on.
Well, to me, so there's two factors to that. One is find a level in terms of investment that you're happy to invest in. And then secondly, you'll get a fairly quick gauge, in my opinion, of whether you're in an easy game or a hard game. Like I don't think it takes too long to know whether you're playing against someone who knows what they're doing. So it's probably a bit of, if you're new into it, if we're not going to say them on here, then it's a bit of suck it and see for just 3-4 times in terms of various different tournaments, but it won't take you long to work out which one is the easiest of the 4 that you should be playing in my opinion. What do you reckon?
I agree with that. Yeah. What else we're going to say? So the most important thing is you'll be getting back to poker because whether you're a professional gambler or a semi-pro, or you are not a professional gambler at all, but you've lost, but your income is halted in some other form, if you're going to play poker to try to make up for lost income in some other source, the very worst thing that can happen is that you lose more money playing poker. So you've got to ensure that you don't put yourself in a situation where you can financially harm yourself by going back to play poker. So start small. You risk a very, very small proportion of your bankroll in any one game, whether that be a cash game or a tournament.
And on that, for me, when I was playing to what I would deem to be a reasonable standard 10 years ago, I would be winning decent sized amounts of money, and then but I was buying into tournaments at a decent level. Whereas now I have a smaller bankroll, and for all that I've won over the last few days, a couple of tournaments, or won decent money in a couple of tournaments, back in the day I would probably go, right, let's kick on and drive on and take on some bigger tournaments. But that is really not sensible because of the point Goffey was making. Like, just because I've won a tournament, it doesn't mean I've made it again and I can, like, the game's mine. So I need to keep discipline within the level I am. Tilting is something that I mentioned, and it's something that poker players talk about. If you get some bad beats, don't chase, and also tilting when you win. If you do land a jackpot or whatever, if it's your first tournament and whatever, and you win it, don't think, right, well, this game's easy, I'm going to buy into a £100 tournament next when it's a £10 tournament that you've won. Keep within your means. Bankroll management is absolutely key. And if you stay disciplined and within the sort of confines that you set yourself at the start, if you've got a bit of game about you, you should hopefully be able to get through a period where you are long-term winning, as opposed to just sort of very volatile spikes in your profit and loss graph.
Yeah, I think in all forms of gambling, an ego can kill you, but none more so than in poker.
Definitely.
If you can buy into your own hype on the back of some short-term results, and think you're the big dog.
Yeah.
And this is the time at the moment where, if you're going to get back into playing poker after a certain amount of time out, or you've been playing for quite a while, it probably isn't time to be massively varying, upping your stakes, thinking you've cracked it, win a lot on a cash game one night, playing 1-2, and decide you're going to play 2-5 the next night, because that's going to end badly.
Yeah.
So,
and lastly on it, then, if you haven't done it before, but you are a gambler who enjoys success sports betting, and that's been taken away from you, would you advise against people taking it up in this interim period?
So I wouldn't advise anyone against learning how to play. But if you're going to log on to an online poker site and start playing, my good lady wife is a good example of this. She had never played poker or had any interest in cards before she met me. At the time we met in 2012, I was playing every night. So she wanted to learn what I was doing and watch. So I taught her how to play, and then we had few sort of friendly house games with friends and stuff like that, and she really enjoyed it. She now plays $3.50 sit and goes on PokerStars, and she wins at that level. She's a long-term winner at the $3.50 level. But if she goes up and plays $15 games, she definitely, and she tried it. And I explained to her, this is the difference in quality at the two levels you're playing. If you allow your ego to think you've cracked the $3.50 games and you're moving up to play lots of $15 tournaments, you're going to lose all of your money doing this. If you go down to $3, I know it's boring. You're winning $12, $15 every time you win, and you're watching your bankroll go up, very small amounts, but she's playing poker, enjoying and making a profit at a very small level. And it took me a little while for her to do not have aspirations of moving up to the next level. All the time you're beating this one, crack on with it. And she gets it. And she's been playing the last few days, and honestly, she wins. And I was surprised as the next man that I could teach her to play at that level. But she's good. She's good at that level, but she can't play at the next level.
Something that I've never done, and I know that there will be poker players that listen to this. Neil, I don't know whether Neil does use software. I'm sure the poker players that listen to this that are good will tell me that I'm mad for not using it. But I've never ever used tracking software or anything like that. HUDs, whatever it is. To be honest, I wouldn't even know what they look like. It's never been something. And to me, I think it would distract me from the game that I play. Again, that might sound.
But this is unwittingly why we quit playing at the time we did, because that's when the HUD explosion came in, and I'm a technophobe. I'm no good with things like that. I would need someone to come and set it up and tell me exactly what it did and what it does. I can't even learn online what things like that do. Everyone that's any good at poker is using them. I'm sure, maybe some aren't, but it's an edge there that is obviously available to you, and I don't really know what I'm doing with it. So,
but for those that might be listening to this who've never played poker before, there is stuff out there that is tracking software on other players, etc. So if you are new to it, you want to learn, do your research, find out what works for you, find the level that suits you. But like anything that is like anything, you've got to put the work in. You can't just pick it up because you played with your mates twice at uni and go, I'm going to make money on PokerStars.
But there'll be lots of online tutorials where you can learn to play, and there are loads of play for free tournaments online that you could go in and decide that whether you enjoy the game without risking anything, and then start to play at a really low level relative to your overall bankroll, where you can start to learn. What we just want to make, do not decide, my source of income's gone, so it's time to play poker and win some more. Because
that's exactly what I decided.
It's not going to end well unless you're smart about your decision making.
And you've really cracked it when you marry someone who puts up with your shit, plays online poker, and is funnier than you on Twitter.
The last bit's incorrect, and she absolutely hates football, and that will never change. I don't mind that though. I don't mind that my wife doesn't like football at all. Like that's just my thing, isn't it?
Definitely funnier on Twitter. Last question, and it's on the NFL. Graham Campbell and Liam Delaney. We're nearly at the hour and a half market, lads. I'm glad we paid.
That's good because we're currently in the sort of last 10 minutes of the football match. If we've published this as we said we had at 3 p.m. on Saturday, then we're going to get 90 minutes out of this.
Exactly.
The replacement for 3 p.m.s.
Can we have Nick's thoughts on the NFL free agency as well, please? Graham says, any advice on NFL draft betting if you have a view? And we should probably tie in the fact that Brady's finally fucked off into that as well.
Well, that's it. Yeah, so I didn't follow the NFL season, and I hardly bet on it last year relative to what I've done in the past. There was too much football on, too much racing on, and they're more important to me than the NFL was. Something had to go. So I didn't. So I haven't been following free agency as much as I would have done in previous years because I wasn't aiming to bet NFL seriously again this year. But everyone spotted Brady's gone to Tampa Bay, having spent 20 years as quarterback in New England.
How big a deal is this? Is the arm strength going a bit? Obviously it is. He's not the quarterback he was 4 or 5 years ago.
Just 1 second, Coffee.
What happened?
You sound like you're in a fishbowl.
Oh.
Lean back.
What's going on? Is that better?
No.
I tell you what, turn your sound off and mute yourself and turn yourself back on.
Can I just, we pause this podcast whilst Nick does it. And this is the man who literally 2 minutes ago said he's a technophobe and now has to self-diagnose why he's in a fishbowl. Nope. Back you go.
Oh, yeah, you're good. You're
All right?
What?
Yeah, you were back temporarily. This is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, who are either listening or watching this. When you can't edit a podcast, what you get is you get a minute and a half of 3 men who don't really know what's going on. One is filling, the other looks incredibly confused, and the man in the middle is laughing. So,
Can you hear me or not?
Yeah, that's
we've got you right. Don't move. Do not move. Now talk.
How about now?
You can't move that. Every time you move, it goes. So you have to stay as still as you can.
What about? Hey, how's this testing?
perfect.
But I'm being serious now, and you're going to think I'm joking, but I'm actually being serious. If you move your mouth too much, it goes funny again. So keep your mouth when you talk. Try and move your mouth less.
Tom Brady has gone to Tampa Bay, and his arm strength has gone a little bit, but he's quarterback.
That's perfect. I'm glad we got the NFL question in.
He's got good wide receivers at Tampa Bay to throw the ball to.
You moved it too much.
I'm glad we got. Goffy, if you're now listening on the podcast, Goffy's he's thrown something. He's not a happy man. But we got all of our questions in.
Isn't there the top 5? Why did he do that? We haven't done, but we won't do that. But isn't there a top 5 household chores you don't do, or you? Yeah, didn't we get? Let's end up.
The why did he do that? We agreed goes to the guy that ate the bat. The top 5, because Goffy loves a top 5. We're going to bring him back for his top 5.
Top 5 ready?
Oh yeah, he's back. If it goes again, we're going to have to get rid of you though.
If it goes again, just get rid of me.
Top 5 household chores to avoid during the shutdown.
No, but I can't really do this because I've got a 34-week pregnant wife. I'm actually doing things around the house.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, we can. But what do you want to? Which is you're perfectly positioned to answer it. What do you want?
I see.
What
all
do you not
DIY, any sort of DIY. She had me moving wardrobes around yesterday. That's not happening again. So I broke one.
DIY is not just doing DIY. I know it says do it yourself, but like,
okay.
moving.
Well, ironing's the worst thing, isn't it? But I get told, no, I can't do it. I burn stuff. I'm not allowed to pack the dishwasher either because apparently I do it wrong.
Yeah, how can you do it wrong?
I'll do it wrong. Yesterday, I offered to do a barbecue for the family yesterday, and I got the barbecue out of the shed for the first time since September, and it's all gone mouldy, so I had to grill the burgers. I can't do barbecues.
Two questions I have on what you said. One, do you put your cutlery in the cutlery holder with the silver end down or up?
Up.
I think that's wrong.
Well, the top of the bit that goes in your mouth to the fork.
Yeah, is the knife pointing upwards or downwards?
Pointing up.
Can I just say, as a father and soon to be a father of 2, you should point them downwards.
Why?
Well, what if Rory's playing and the dishwasher's left open and he trips and falls?
He's fucked, isn't it?
Point two. Good luck, Vicky. Point 2, I don't know whether you had a cleaner before. Can't edit this. But you don't have one now because of social distancing, I assume. So what is the one thing you would leave? Is there a room or a specific thing you'd refuse to clean?
I don't know. I don't really. I'm trying to be a modern man and help out as much as I can, but apparently it just leads to more problems.
And as we all know, Goffey, there's no I in team.
There is no I in team.
What a perfect sort of circle this podcast is. Come on.
We started here, then you've wasted 90 minutes of your life, and now we're back here. You could have just skipped from the start to the end.
Get Foldsy on now to finish off.
Can I do a jingle to round off the podcast?
Definitely.
It's not going to be a jingle, but I'm going to do the final whistle.
Okay.
Just tell me when you're ready. I just want to say that was really...
Just WhatsApped me. This is the longest pod ever.
You should reply. You've come out of it very well. You shark, you poker shark. No one's taking on Goff 78 in future. Thank you, lads. That was really interesting. Thanks, Goffey. Are we going to do these? Are we going to do this to keep us sane over the?
Let's wait and see, because people might think this is genuinely the worst thing they've ever seen. In which case, we'll have to retire it.
Yeah.
But if it goes down all right,
I think there's a chance we might have to do it behind closed doors, genuinely, and just call each other, because people will just be like, "Shut up, it's too long." I don't care.
But if we are to do it again, my idea of maybe getting Channing or James Knight or someone to dial in for 10 minutes and just talk to us might go down well.
What we should do is we should hope that this is well received. So if you've liked it, please let us know, because we're all egotists and we like praise. If you don't, please don't get in touch for the opposite reason. But what we should do is in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, when we have as you say, if we have a clearer idea of the landscape in a few weeks' time, we should get those people on board, and we should do a more broader chat to various different people about how the industry is going to look. Because I think that would be very interesting for us, but also very interesting for the listeners and, in this case, viewers. So, yeah, let's plan to do that. This is like our sort of post-pod conference call that everyone's listening to.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The last thing before the final whistle I'll say is, if somebody out there wants to Photoshop Nick Goff's face on a butler in the buff, please do. Ollie, finish us off.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time on Only Balls and Horses. That is the 90 plus injury time done.
Bye-bye.
Beautiful. Bye now.